find it truly amazing and wonderful that we are all gathered here today to honor a woman who has obviously touched our lives. I suspect that many in this room were born after her death, and only a rare few have the privilege of actually knowing her. And yet, she has become an integral part of our lives. Her films and photos continue to bring enjoyment, and her life struggles still inspire us. Her image promotes many products today from nearby billboards, and book after book about her continues to be published. We all have our own unique reasons why Marilyn is so special to us. However, I must say that it is really a thrill that so many of you care so much. And Marilyn Remembered would like to thank you all for coming today, and we would like to host all of you this evening at my home for a special tribute to Marilyn. And at the end of the service, you may pick up a little flyer that will tell you all the directions and information you'll need if you would like to join us this evening for that at 7 o'clock. Her sensitivity, vulnerability, beauty, talent, humor, and wit, the list is endless. It is such a thrill to look out and see people from all corners of the earth today who are drawn here. Perhaps her physical being has left us, but indeed her spirit is alive with us today. Before we begin the printed part of the service, I would like to invite up for just a brief moment to share with us someone special here today who actually went to grammar school with Marilyn Monroe. I'd like to introduce to you Gladys Wilson.
This is unexpected for me, but I feel I'm here to represent my classmates from Emerson Junior High School, which is here in Westwood, and University High School in West Los Angeles. We were good, I will say we were friends at that time, and then I wanted to also say that she did go to Van Nuys High. That was something that is important to those from Van Nuys High, that she went to the 10th grade, half 10th in the B10 at Van Nuys High, and then spent the last of the semester in University High, and then married to Jack Doherty at the end of the 10th grade, or before the end of the 10th grade. There's one thing that, a story I will repeat to you that I haven't had a chance to for a long time, and that's when we were young, when I was young with my husband, we had a potluck dinner. That's where everybody brings a dish. And that evening, my friend said to me, "Do you know who is on the cover of Life magazine?" And I said, "Yes, Marilyn Monroe." And he said, I knew he had a scoop. And he said, "Norma Jean Baker." And I could not believe it, just couldn't believe it. And neither could anybody there that night. We were just kind of in a fog all night. So I tore off the front of the Life magazine, the picture of her, and I sent it to a girlfriend that was about as close as I was with Norma Jean, and asked her to identify it, and did she have any idea that it could be Norma Jean Baker? And no way, it took us years to really believe we were that naive that it could be Norma Jean Baker, because when we were in school, she was naive. She was, of course, beautiful, but she was naive and was a little bit impoverished. And anyhow, it was our wonderful Marilyn Monroe. So I'm just very happy to be here today to admire and to memorialize and to share the love, the memories that Marilyn left us with. And I thank you.
Thank you, Gladys, for sharing that. That was totally unexpected, but I appreciate your willingness to say something. Before I go on again, I'd like to also point out two people who just arrived who are very special also, and that is Mrs. Nunez and her son Michael, who actually bought Marilyn's home after Marilyn died. So they had the privilege of being the first people to live in her home after that. And I'm sure they have lots of warm memories of that home. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce to you Tina Mueller, who is the president of the German fan club, Some Like It Hot.
she was a wonderful person, a beautiful woman, and a very good actress. And that's when I started to be an admirer of her. She was so, I can't find words for it. Let's stay together this day, and let's hold a good thought of Marilyn. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is going to be someone who is starting a club that is just being formed in Florida. I'll let her introduce that, and her name is Debbie Jasker.
Good afternoon. I represent the U.S. Club to Marilyn Report, and I'm here today not to mourn the loss of Marilyn, but to celebrate her life. She was a gifted and wonderful person, and a beautiful soul inside. And with that thought, that is my words to share. And I'd like to introduce as our next speaker, Mickey Song.
Hello, my name is Mickey Song. I had the privilege of working with Marilyn when she sang Happy Birthday to the President. I was working with them, and I was at Madison Square Garden, and I got to recomb her hair before she went on stage. It was an absolutely magnificent evening, and I don't think she ever looked even more beautiful than that particular night. But I have a 7-year-old niece now, and she is now a Marilyn fan too. So it is amazing to me how she's transcended through all the years, and that we never seem to get quite enough of her. I think she loved us so early that we never ever got enough. And especially for me, I'm glad to see that everybody's here to remember her. Thank you.
Our next speaker is a gentleman who had the very great fortune of appearing in 5 films with Marilyn. Lucky man. And he has many wonderful stories he shared with us over the years at the club. And it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Ron Nyman.
Good morning and welcome to everybody. It's good to see so many faces, familiar faces. And it's nice to have everybody here for the celebration of life for Marilyn. It was about 45 years ago, come this November, that I got my first job at 20th Century Fox in a movie that you might have heard of called The Movie for Blondes. For you who remember the movie and know the number in particular, in Everyone Here for Love with Jane Russell, we rehearsed it for about 5 or 6 weeks. And during rehearsals one day, we were told to go to the wardrobe department, get into our U.S. Olympic team outfits, and report to the back lot. Where there was a mock-up of the ship at the railroad station used for our shooting set, and it was a permanent set until it was torn down and became, which has now became part of Century City. We shot the latter part of the Bye Bye Baby number, if you remember it, first with Marilyn, which was out of sequence. The interior was to be shot later at Western Avenue, which was another part of 20th Century Fox. So actually, this was to be my first encounter with Marilyn. When she arrived on the set, entourage and tow, makeup, the wardrobe, everybody there. She was looking gorgeous, of course, and all smiles, and said, "Hello, boys, how are you?" And that was my first experience with Marilyn. I had immigrated from England and had been studying for my citizenship, and while working on the picture, I was called in with my examination. And I shamefully admit I failed horribly, and the examiner quizzed me and said, "What have you been studying?" And he said, "I can't pass you." He wanted to know what I'd been doing and working, so I told him I got a break in a movie with Marilyn and Jane. And I could see that he was impressed, and he asked me if I could introduce him to Marilyn. Well, I might not have known all I should about the Constitution and the system of this country, but I wasn't completely stupid. And basically he said, "Well, yes, of course I can." So he passed me. It was about so in case he would call me. Well, I never heard from him again until that touring into him. He came over to me and he said, Ron, I'm going to call you for that introduction. Well, to this day I haven't heard, and so I guess he missed it by a mile. But I have Marilyn to thank for my citizenship, and she never knew it. She was kind, outgoing, and vulnerable, and liked being with us. Jane often had lunch with us, and usually we would go to a place on Sunset Boulevard called the Roundup. It was all you could eat for $1. So members of the gym team would be there and gorge ourselves, and Jane would be there, and obviously icing on the cake. Marilyn, on the other hand, often brown bagged it on the set, and she would eat with us. Sometimes we would only have a half an hour for lunch. We would just eat on the set because on the days that we were shooting, it was just too much of a hassle to get to the commissary, get served, to get back to the stage in time. Marilyn studied hard and rehearsed very diligently. While shooting a movie called No Business Like Show Business, and I played the tattooed sailor in a number called Being a Sailor Till a Sailor Gets Tattooed. I had tattoos all over, thank God now. The choreographer by the name of Robert Orton, he was also the director, who was the only choreographer at that time who had it in his contract that he could film his own dance numbers, which was very unusual because the choreographer would get the number together, and then whoever was directing the movie would shoot the number, and it was very unfair. So anyhow, he had that in his own contract, and he said to me one day, he said, you know, Marilyn is one of the most sure-footed dancers I've ever worked with. He said, when she puts her foot down, that's where it's supposed to be. So I did work with Marilyn on 5 of her movies, and I think she would be very thrilled and to be remembered by you on this very special day. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and now I'd like to introduce Hetty McGinnon.
Oh boy, wish I were a little taller. But anyway, thank you. Hi, I'm Penny, and I was the girl trumpet player in Some Like It Hot. I really have wonderful memories of Marilyn, just etched on my heart, I guess. I felt that she was the epitome of a charismatic person. She was always kind and generous, easy to talk to. She just had that magic. And I remember one day on the set, it was a particularly trying day, and Marilyn wasn't feeling up to par, and she said, she was muffling her lines, and Billy Wilder was rather exasperated. And afterwards, when she got it right, and it was wonderful, she said, you know, adios. And Billy said, oh, this was a really tough day for me. And I said, Billy, what is it about Marilyn, you know, that makes people want to work with her? And he said, because on that screen, she's magic. And that's true, she was magic. And so I hope the good Lord up there is letting her peer down today, letting her know of all the people that love her and care about her. And we do love you, Marilyn. We really do. Thank you. I want to introduce Jane Guy. She's here from Australia, and she's head of the fan club there.
I was nervous that I had to write mine down. My name is Jane Guy, and I represent the Marilyn Monroe Australian Fan Club. I'm not here today as a friend or a family member or even an acquaintance of Marilyn's. Like most of you, I'm simply here as a fan. And as a fan, you know, I often wonder when which I think is quite rare, is a sea of respectful, loyal, dedicated and loving fans. Fans she acknowledged and was grateful to in her lifetime, and fans who continue to celebrate her memory with dignity, respect and admiration. Since our club began in 1989, I've been privileged to come into contact with hundreds of Marilyn Monroe's fans. We're here today in tribute, and I'm proud to be among you. I'd like to thank Marilyn Remembered for inviting me here today, and I'd like to thank all of Marilyn's fans who made today's tribute possible. I know we're all holding a good thought for the brightest star in the galaxy. Thank you very much, and it's my great pleasure to introduce a man I really admire, and his name is Mr. George Barris.
Thank you for coming. I'm so glad to see so many of Marilyn's friends and fans from many parts of the world. I first met Marilyn back in 1954. As a photojournalist, I talked to my editor and said, you know, this new girl that seems to be, she's going to be a big hit, is doing location shooting here in New York City, and it might be a good idea if I follow her around for a few days and do a story on her. Thought about it for a while, and he said, it sounds fine. So I went over to their location. It was on 61st between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. It was an old brownstone house that they were using. The film was 7-year inch, and the stars, of course, were Marilyn Monroe and Tom Ewell. I walked up to the 2nd floor, and there was Marilyn leaning out the window. I started to take photographs without her knowing it, but I think the click of the camera shutter around. So she turned around, she looked at me, and I said, uh-oh, there's going to be a problem here. She smiled, she says, I'll take a dozen of those. That sort of broke the ice. She was wonderful to work with. I stayed with her 4 or 5 days that we were on location. And instead of things getting better, they seemed to sort of turn the other way, especially when they started to do that famous skirt flying picture. That was shot between 2 and 3 in the morning. It was a hot, sultry evening on Lexington Avenue and around 54th Street in front of the old Translux Theater. And she was coming out of the theater with Tom Ewell. She stops on a grating there at the subway. It was a very warm night. And she says, I'd like to get a little breeze. And of course, the train comes by and the skirt flies high, and the director shot that about a dozen or 20 times. Her husband at that time was Joe DiMaggio. He was standing there with a friend of his, Walter Winchell, who was a famous Broadway columnist. And there was a crowd, mostly of men, hundreds of them. They kept yelling every time her skirt went up, more, Marilyn, more. And Joe turned to his friend Walter and he said, I've had it. And he just walked away. Marilyn, after the shoot, turned and said to the director, Billy Wilder, I hope this isn't being used for your friends' stag parties. He just laughed. She laughed it off too. But you know, that was the beginning of the end, as I found out later, because her marriage about 9 months later with Joe broke up. And, but it was the beginning of a good, long friendship with her, between me and Marilyn. And she said to me one day, the only good thing that I think came out of it all is that I met you. We became friends. Maybe we were both Geminis, born under the same sign. Who knows? But it was a friendship that lasted until just before her death. When I got together with her after coming back from a terrible ordeal in Rome, Italy, where the same film company, 20th Century Fox, was shooting the Cleopatra film with famous Elizabeth Taylor. But everything was going wrong there. It was a terrible mess. The most important thing was that the studio was getting bankrupt, and they had a contract with Marilyn. She had one more film to do on her 7-year contract. And the thoughts were that she's going to save our studio. She was only getting, at that time, $1,500 a week, and Elizabeth, as a freelance, was getting $1 million, which was unheard of in those days. And Marilyn said, well, poor little me, I've got to save this big studio. So she went to work. But she wasn't feeling well in those days. This is now going into 1962. And she was out quite a few days. And I came back from Rome, had lunch with my editor. I was doing a lot of work for Cosmopolitan magazine as a freelance photojournalist. And I said to my editor, Bob, I said, why don't we do something with Marilyn? Here, she's 36. She's still beautiful, but how long can she go on playing little girl parts? I said, let's do a big feature on her. Where does she go from here? He said, great, I love it. We were having lunch, and he said, let's not have lunch, and let's stop, and how soon can you get out to California? So I called a friend of mine over at 20th Century Fox and said, I'm coming out, but don't say anything to Marilyn, I just want to surprise her. I arrived in Los Angeles. It was her birthday, the 1st of June. I went out to the studio, met her there. She looked at me rather surprised. She said, what are you doing here? I said, just came out to wish you happy birthday. She said, oh, yeah. We got to talking, and she had a big scene to do with Dean Martin then. And she said to me, why don't you hang around? We'll talk about old times. I said, okay, fine. Well, it came near 5 o'clock, which was quitting time on the set, and she said to me, what's this all about? What are you really doing here? And I told her that we had an idea to do a feature on her with a cover. She loved the idea, and I said, Marilyn, remember once we talked about, let's do a book someday together, you with your words and my pictures depicting you through the many years of your life. And she said, oh yeah, I remember, lovely idea, let's do it. So at 5, when everything stopped, they were ready to go home. Somebody came out and yelled, wait just a minute, folks. And a group of them wheeled out a beautiful birthday cake, which was a complete surprise. And they put these 4th of July candles on it, you know, that flash. They came out with their favorite champagne Dog Perignon. And everyone starts singing happy birthday, and I was standing there. She motioned for me to come over. She says, come on over, I want you to help me cut this cake, which was a great honor. So I went over to her and helped her cut the cake. And I think that was one of her last happy days, because after that, that following Monday when we were supposed to get together, she never showed. And then on the radio came a flash that she's not feeling well and that she's not attending the day at the studio. And then this went on for days, and they threatened to fire her. They were going to put an actress named Lee Remick in her role because Lee happened to fit into the costumes, which would save them a lot of money for this film called Something's Got to Give. But she really was sick. She wasn't too well. Her own doctors sent a report to the studio, and they didn't believe it, so they sent over their own doctors. And he came back with the same report. She's not well. And they were panicking in New York, where the executives of Fox were. The studio was going under. The film in Italy with Liz Taylor was over $30 million. They didn't even have a script. They were writing from day to day. What were they going to do? Their only hope was Marilyn Monroe. But she was in ill condition. So they told her she's fired. And she sat home, and she started to feel a little better. We were talking. So we had to decide on where we were going to take pictures of her and when. And the most important thing was that we didn't have a place to shoot the pictures. Her home was a beautiful little house in Brentwood, but it had no furniture. She had gone to Mexico before that, and she bought a lot of Mexican-style furniture. But the furniture still didn't arrive, and just was no place to shoot these pictures. So I contacted a friend of mine, Tim Lamert, who was a real estate developer. He had a beautiful house up in the Hollywood Hills, West Hollywood. He said, Marilyn Monroe, are you kidding? I said, no, really, we'd love to use your home. It's a beautiful home up there. It's a brand new house. He said, okay, only on one condition. You introduce me to Marilyn. So I spoke to her, and she said, sure, why not? So she said, in the meantime, why don't you go shopping and buy some nice things that you think would be suitable for the pictures. So I went shopping for Marilyn. Went over to Saks Fifth Avenue and Wilshire Boulevard into Dax, which was her favorite sports shop. Got her some things. And Tim decided that we could use the house. At first we thought maybe we'll fly over it and look it over, but he said it's not necessary. So we went over to the house, and he had a maid there named Louise. Louise was jumping up and down. She says to me, are you really sure this is Marilyn Monroe coming here? I said, as far as I know, it's her. And she says, I just want to say hello. Can I say hello to her? I said, sure. So when Marilyn walked in, and she had her clothes with her, and her dear friend, who was also a press agent, Penn, and myself, Whitey Snyder, who was the makeup man, and of course Agnes Flanagan did her hair. We all marched in, and this poor little Louise couldn't talk. She just stood there and looked with her eyes open, her mouth open. And Marilyn put her hand out to shake hands, and she says to her, are you really Marilyn Monroe? And Marilyn said, well, that's what they tell me. She says, are you sure? She says, yeah, that's what I've been told. So Tim said, George, would Marilyn allow you to take a picture to prove that I did meet her and that she was up at my house here? She agreed to that. We took a picture. We never published it in respect for Marilyn. And then I said, Tim, as you promised, you'd leave, and Louise would leave because we've got a long session. We're going to take lots of pictures. They did leave. Marilyn and I got to work. We had a chance to talk about her life. And she was so much a pro. I mean, she started as a model, and this is what she loved to do. In front of the camera, she was just fantastic. We spent days shooting pictures. We went down to the beach in Santa Monica, past the Peter Lawford house, and she stopped and stared at it because many things went on there. Many parties and meetings, and the president and vice and attorney general, his brother Bob Kennedy. And I guess this brought back lots and lots of memories and tears to her eyes. But when we started to shoot pictures, everything changed. The smile came back. She was that sweet little girl again. And it was just fantastic working with her. The pictures of her will always keep her and freeze her at that beautiful age of 36. She looked a lot younger than her years. She was just fantastic. And these are my memories of Marilyn. Great memories. I went back to New York to prepare the book that we were going to do in the Cosmopolitan feature with a cover. And on a Friday afternoon, I was at my office at the newspapers. I get a phone call late in the afternoon from Marilyn. Can I come back to see her? And I said, I'm busy getting this together. She said, it's pretty important. So I said, well, I'll try to get out there Monday. Is that all right? She said, yeah, that'll be fine. So that weekend, I went up to the country and stayed with my family, brother-in-law. It was about 100 miles outside of New York City. And went to a little country store to get some groceries on a Sunday morning, and my brother-in-law, Frank, went in, came running out and said, it just came over the radio. And I said, why? He said, Marilyn Marilyn's dead. I just froze. I couldn't believe it. It was like a terrible shock. The first thing that came to my mind is to get back to New York and find out what really happened. I couldn't believe that she'd be dead here. I was going to leave the next day. She said she had some pretty important things to talk about. She wanted to talk to me. But I'll never know what it was. But there's one thing I will know, that as far as I'm concerned, she never took her own life. There was too much evidence to prove that she was murdered, and I'll always believe that, but I'll always remember this sweet little girl who became this great movie star, and she did it all on her own. As her old boss, Daryl Zanuck, said, nobody helped her. Everything she got because she deserved it. She worked hard for it, and she was a sweet, soulful person. And it's so good to see all you people that came here to this 15th anniversary. God bless you all, and I know Marilyn from above is happy to know that they still remember her. Her fans, her friends from all over the world. Thank you so much for coming. Bye.
I'm feeling a little emotional because as I looked around, I realized that it was 10 years ago that I first met most of you, and it really brought to my attention how much and how many people still love Marilyn, who I love so much from the time we first met, and was so sweet and wonderful and special, and certainly deserved and still deserves all the love and adulation that is being given to her. And she always had not just the age when we lived together when we were 13, 14, 15, but always was trying to improve herself so much and be a better person, improve her looks. And I think in the 10 years since I did meet all of you people, and what continuing improvement you are establishing. And I'm just really overcome when I look around and see so many people who still love her because no one ever deserved more. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Are you tired? Stand up and stretch now. Well, I spent 3 years with Marilyn. We were very happy. She was wonderful. She fought to the underdog. While I was with her, maybe like 10 o'clock in 1959, the actors were not on strike. But they made a deal, the actors made a deal with Jerry Wall to finish our production. There was a man on the set, they used to sell coffee and donuts, etc. When we came back to Fox, we were the only show shooting. And the studio from the commissary sent down silver urns of coffee, beautiful Danish pastry. The man who made the coffee had to go back to work later. He waylaid Marilyn as she who was then head of production. When he heard the secretary told him that Marilyn was calling, he thought, my God, what's next? And she told him about Swiggy, who was labor's name, couldn't make his coffee. That afternoon, Swiggy got session back. Oh, let me introduce Donald Spoda, who wrote the best book on Marilyn.
Good morning and congratulations to you all for having the sensitivity, the perception, and the good sense to be here today. To honor, I think, a woman who may remain one of the least appreciated, most misperceived, most misunderstood people in American popular culture. When I was asked 7 years ago to have a look at some thousands of cartons of material on the life and career of Marilyn Monroe that no one had ever seen before, my first reaction was, what's there to know? Everyone knows about the life and death of Marilyn Monroe. And then I set to work. I agreed to have a look one afternoon at the material. And very soon I learned that what we now call the conventional wisdom or the received tradition, the popular myths about Marilyn Monroe, are, to use polite language, a pile of rubbish. And yet people still believe that Marilyn Monroe was a pathetic creature. You all know it. An alcoholic. She never was. A drug addict. She wasn't that either. A promiscuous woman of easy virtue who used statesman and politician to gratify her own ego and to move to the top of the social and political world. She never did any of that. These were stories invented years later by unscrupulous people ready for a quick buck. We all know about Marilyn, poor confused Marilyn, who finally, in a misery of rejection by people highly placed in government, either took her own life or was done away by her because she threatened to, what is the pop phrase, blow the lid off? In any case, it was a great pleasure and a great honor to be able to present to the world a woman of enormous talent, a woman of sensitivity, and a woman who, by your presence here, like millions of other people in the world, you appreciate the truth, you respect the truth, and as a matter of fact, your presence here betokens that. And so, among all the many things that have been written and said, what we can do here today in the very place where we bid her goodbye is in fact to commend her to the mercy of God, who is truth and knows the truth, and in fact joins us in honoring that today. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Donald. We'd like to conclude the service today with a very special tape. We have acquired the actual tape of Marilyn's service here in 1962, 35 years ago. And we would like to play for you now Lee Strasberg reading the eulogy that he read that day. Following that, we will have a vocal selection that I have written for Marilyn to commemorate her. It will be sung by Sue Ann Pinner.
Marilyn Monroe was a legend. In her own lifetime, she created a myth of what a poor girl from a deprived background could attain. For the entire world, she became a symbol of the eternal feminine. But I have no words to describe the myth and the legend, nor would she want us to do so. I did not know this Marilyn Monroe, nor did she. We gather here today knew only Marilyn, a warm human being, impulsive and shy and lonely, sensitive and in fear of rejection, yet ever avid for life and reaching out for fulfillment. I will not insult the privacy of your memory of her, a privacy she sought and treasured, by trying to describe her whom you know to you who knew her. In our memories of her, she remains alive, not only a shadow on the screen or a glamorous personality. For us, Marilyn was a devoted and loyal friend, a colleague constantly reaching for perfection. We shared her pain and difficulties and some of her joys. She was a member of our family. It is difficult to accept the fact that her zest for life has been ended by this dreadful accident. Despite the heights and brilliance she had attained on the screen, she was planning for the future. She was looking forward to participating in the many exciting things which she planned. In her eyes and in mine, her career was just beginning. The dream of her talent, which she had nurtured as a child, was not a mirage. When she first came to me, I was amazed at the startling sensitivity which she possessed and which had remained fresh and undimmed, struggling to express itself despite the light to which she had been subjected. Others were as physically beautiful as she was, but there was obviously something more in her, something that people saw and recognized in her performances and with which they identified. She had a luminous quality, a combination of wistfulness, radiance, yearning, that set her apart and yet made everyone wish to be part of it, to share in the childish naivete which was at once so shy and yet so vibrant. This quality was even more evident when she was on the stage. I'm truly sorry that you and the public who loved her did not have the opportunity to see her as we did in many of the roles that foreshadowed what she would have become. Without a doubt, she would have been one of the really great actresses of the stage. Now it is all at an end. I hope that her death will stir sympathy and understanding for a sensitive artist and woman who brought joy and pleasure to the world. I cannot say goodbye. Marilyn never liked goodbye. And the peculiar way she had of turning things around so that they faced reality, I will say au revoir. For the country to which she has gone, we must all someday visit.
Our dear friend, and Greg is going to play for me today.
back to me.